Active imagination is Carl Jung's most advanced technique for accessing the unconscious in a direct and transformative way. Unlike other methods, such as dream analysis, it allows for a conscious interaction with internal symbols and images, leading to profound psychological changes. However, this practice requires caution. The unconscious contains both constructive and challenging aspects, and when accessing these layers, unexpected content may arise. In this video, you will learn how to use this practice to better understand your emotions, unlock your inner potential, and transform aspects of your psyche that influence your life. By watching, you will gain a step-by-step guide on how to apply active imagination safely and effectively, as well as an understanding of how it can provide valuable insights for your personal transformation. But what exactly is active imagination? It's a technique that Carl Jung developed for those who truly want to understand their own mind. Many people have heard of dream analysis, free association, and even unconscious symbols, but most still see these things as distant, almost too theoretical. What Jung discovered was a way to interact directly with these inner images, without having to wait for a dream or an interpretation. The difference? Here, you are not just a spectator of your own unconscious. You actively enter the process, engage in conversation with the symbols that appear, and experience these interactions firsthand, without relying on the logic of rational thought. This completely changes the way we approach self-knowledge. Instead of trying to understand an emotion like a mental puzzle, active imagination allows you to directly engage with this part of your psyche and discover what it has to say. Jung realized that merely interpreting symbols from a distance wasn't enough. You have to interact with them. And this inner dialogue isn't just a psychological technique. It's a real way to access what is hidden in the unconscious. Often, problems that seemed impossible to solve start to make sense once you allow this kind of contact. It's not magic or superstition. It's a psychological process that can bring answers your rational mind alone could never reach. And the most interesting part? This isn't something limited to psychology scholars. Anyone can apply active imagination to deal with fears, insecurities, and internal conflict. Imagine someone experiencing anxiety for no apparent reason. Instead of just trying to distract themselves or rationalize what's happening, this technique allows them to visualize their anxiety as an image, a character, or even a concrete sensation, and then try to understand what it represents. This direct communication with the unconscious can change everything. Not because it provides ready-made answers, but because it allows you to see your internal processes in a much clearer way. Jung's discovery of the technique. In 1913, Carl Jung was going through one of the most difficult times of his life. He had broken ties with Freud, his mentor and friend, and this separation was not just professional but also deeply emotional. Psychoanalysis was taking a direction he could no longer follow, and for the first time, Jung found himself completely alone in forging his own path. During this phase, he decided to explore his own mind in a different way. Instead of just analyzing dreams, as was common at the time, he chose to interact with the images and symbols emerging from his unconscious. What started as a personal experiment eventually became one of the most revolutionary methods in psychology. Much of this journey is recorded in the Red Book, a detailed journal where Jung wrote and illustrated his experiences with active imagination. He realized something that few people understand even today. Our mind is not just a storage space for memories and repressed emotions. There is an entire world inside us, full of symbols and patterns that shape our feelings and reactions to life situations. But instead of simply observing all of this from a distance, he chose to engage directly, talk to these images, and understand what they wanted to communicate. This was the key that allowed him to transform his own inner conflicts into real knowledge. Now, think about the impact of that. How many times have you felt trapped in a whirlwind of thoughts or emotions that didn't make sense? Most people try to ignore them, distract themselves, or rationalize their feelings. But Jung showed that there's another way, facing them head-on. Active imagination allows you to do exactly that. Instead of running from distress or anxiety, you can sit down, close your eyes, and ask that feeling, "What do you want to tell me?" This simple act can bring unexpected answers and completely change how you deal with your emotions. How does active imagination work? To begin practicing active imagination, the first step is to create a calm and quiet environment. You need to be in a place where you feel comfortable and free from interruptions. Sit comfortably, preferably with a straight but relaxed posture, and close your eyes. The goal here is to step away from external distractions so that your mind has the space to explore freely. With your body relaxed, focus on keeping your mind alert yet receptive, as if you are ready to listen to whatever your unconscious wants to offer. This is not about controlling your mind, but about allowing images and feelings to arise naturally, without trying to direct them. The second step begins when images or thoughts start to emerge. Instead of just observing them passively, you take action. Imagine that an image or a character appears before you, perhaps a figure you recognize from a dream or a sensation you can't quite identify. The next step is to interact with it. If the image is a character, you can ask who they are, what they represent, or what message they have for you. If it's a vague sensation, like anxiety or fear, try to understand what's behind it by visualizing it as a figure or a scene. The key is to allow yourself to explore without rushing to interpret or control the experience. After going through the experience, it's crucial to document everything that happened. No matter how abstract or confusing it may seem, recording it will help you organize and process what you've experienced. This can be done through written notes, drawings, or even voice recordings. This process not only reinforces what you've lived but also allows you to revisit the material later and identify patterns or insights that may have surfaced. Some people prefer to do this at the end of each session, while others wait until later. But what matters is ensuring that the content of the experience is not lost over time. This step of recording experiences creates a continuous link between the unconscious and consciousness, allowing the transformation process to continue. Risks and precautions. Active imagination is a powerful tool, but like any deep psychological technique, it requires caution. The unconscious is not a safe and controlled space. It's not like watching a movie from a distance. When someone chooses to interact with internal symbols, they may encounter difficult content, such as repressed fears, unresolved traumas, or impulses they'd rather ignore. For some, this can be unsettling, especially if they are already prone to dissociative states or intense anxiety episodes. The first precaution, then, is to never treat this practice as a simple relaxation exercise. It works with deep layers of the psyche, which is why it must be approached responsibly. Another essential point is to keep one foot in reality. Those who immerse themselves too deeply in active imagination without a sense of structure may end up confusing symbolic experiences with real life. For this reason, Jung always recommended observing and processing the images without fully identifying with them. It's like watching a theater play. You acknowledge that, in the end, it's a representation of the psyche, not objective reality. To avoid this kind of confusion, one effective strategy is to write down each session's experiences immediately after finishing. This simple act helps organize thoughts and maintain clarity between the internal and external world. In cases of very intense or frightening experiences, seeking guidance from an experienced therapist can be helpful. Some of the images that arise in active imagination can be difficult to interpret alone, and a professional can help give them a more constructive meaning. Additionally, those dealing with extreme anxiety, deep depression, or any delicate mental condition should evaluate whether this practice is appropriate at the moment. Self-knowledge should not become a trigger for further suffering but rather a path to integrating fragmented parts of the psyche. The difference between dreams and active imagination. Dreams are a gateway to the unconscious, but active imagination is the next level. When a person dreams, they receive images, sensations, and messages from the unconscious involuntarily, without any control over what happens. In active imagination, however, there is conscious participation. Instead of merely watching what the mind projects, the practitioner can engage with the scenes, converse with characters, and modify elements of the experience. This is a huge difference. A dream happens while the person is asleep, whereas active imagination occurs while they are awake. This completely changes the level of access to the unconscious. Another crucial point is that dreams are fragmented and follow their own logic, often disconnected from reality. They emerge spontaneously and need to be interpreted after waking up. With active imagination, there's no need to wait for the unconscious to manifest itself. The practitioner can initiate the process whenever they choose, simply by entering a receptive state and allowing images to arise. Additionally, communication with the unconscious becomes more direct because there is no forgetfulness filter like in dreams. If a symbolic figure appears, you can ask it directly what it represents, rather than trying to decipher its meaning afterward. For this reason, Jung viewed active imagination as a more advanced technique than simply analyzing dreams. Instead of merely reflecting on what was seen, the practitioner has the opportunity to act within the experience. This makes psychological transformation occur in a deeper and more immediate way. Anyone who has ever tried to interpret a dream knows how difficult it can be to understand certain images and symbols. With active imagination, the experience becomes more vivid and accessible, allowing for real interaction with unconscious content. This direct contact with one's own psyche can lead to significant changes in how a person perceives themselves and deals with their emotions. Examples of application. Dealing with intense emotions can often feel impossible. When persistent fear arises, when insecurity grows without an apparent reason, or when an unknown feeling takes hold, the most common reaction is to ignore or rationalize it. But that rarely solves the problem. Active imagination offers a different approach, engaging directly with these internal states and allowing them to reveal their hidden messages. For example, someone who constantly fears failure can use this technique to visualize that sensation and transform it into a symbolic image. It could be an unfamiliar face, a shadow, an animal, whatever appears spontaneously. From there, the interaction begins. Instead of running from the image, the person can ask what it represents and listen to the response that emerges. Another common situation is anger that seems to have no explanation. Instead of repressing it or taking it out on others, active imagination allows it to be observed and understood on a deeper level. When closing one's eyes and allowing an image to emerge, anger often transforms into something unexpected, an aggressive character, a flame, a storm. The fascinating part of this process is that by dialoguing with this symbolic representation, it becomes easier to understand its origins. Sometimes, anger hides frustration, a sense of powerlessness, or even a disguised fear. When this dialogue happens, the emotion loses its intensity and starts to make sense. This method can also be applied in moments of indecision. If you've ever felt torn between two choices and couldn't decide, you can use active imagination to visualize each option and observe how the unconscious reacts. In many cases, the answer doesn't come from rational analysis but from the feeling each image evokes. One path may appear bright and welcoming, while the other seems filled with shadows and tension. These symbolic representations are ways for the unconscious to communicate what truly resonates. It's a simple yet incredibly effective method for dealing with internal dilemmas and finding answers that the logical mind alone cannot provide. The power of active imagination in personal transformation. Changing your life doesn't happen through rational reflection alone. Many times, the greatest blocks come from parts of the unconscious that have never been explored. Active imagination enables direct contact with repressed content, revealing aspects that may be preventing personal growth. Those who practice this technique regularly notice subtle yet profound changes. Misunderstood emotions start to make sense, repetitive patterns become clearer, and answers that once seemed impossible finally emerge. This process is essential for reaching a higher level of self-awareness because it's not just about understanding what happens internally, it's about integrating these discoveries into real life. Recording these experiences can further amplify the result. Writing about the images that arise, drawing the symbols that appear, or even turning the experience into a metaphor helps solidify the learning process. Jung did this frequently in the Red Book, documenting his interactions with figures from the unconscious. This habit prevents experiences from becoming fleeting moments without practical effect. When reviewing notes days or weeks later, patterns begin to emerge. Small details gain meaning, and the connection with the unconscious deepens. This practice doesn't require artistic talent or special skills. Any form of recording, no matter how simple, serves its purpose. Over time, active imagination can also reveal hidden talents and potential. Many people live trapped in labels imposed on them, unaware of the vast possibilities within. By engaging with internal images, it becomes easier to recognize neglected abilities and explore paths that feel more authentic. In some cases, this practice leads to a career change, the discovery of a new purpose, or simply a new way of seeing oneself. Its impact extends beyond the mind. It influences every aspect of life. The process of conducting active imagination. Before starting the practice, it is essential to prepare both the environment and the mind. A quiet, distraction-free space makes concentration easier and prevents unnecessary interruptions. Some people prefer to dim the lights, while others find it helpful to light a candle or play soft instrumental music. The goal isn't to create a mystical ritual but to establish a state of mental receptivity. Posture also makes a difference. Sitting in a comfortable position, without lying down to avoid falling asleep, helps maintain focus. The key is for the body to remain relaxed while the mind stays alert and ready for what may arise. Once the environment is ready, the next step is to focus on a starting point. This could be a recent dream, a strong emotion from the day, or even a random image that comes to mind. There's no need to force anything. The unconscious manifests naturally when given space. As soon as a scene or character appears, the best approach is to let the experience unfold without interference from rational thought. Some people see figures clearly, while others experience only sensations or image fragments. What matters is not the exact form of the experience but the willingness to follow along without trying to force an immediate interpretation. During the session, the temptation to analyze everything immediately may arise, but that is not the time for it. The focus should be on fully experiencing the moment, allowing the symbols to present themselves without judgment. Once the session is over, that's when it's time to document and reflect on what was seen. Writing or drawing what happened helps maintain clarity and recognize patterns over time. The unconscious doesn't communicate in a direct way, so some images may seem confusing at first but become clearer with practice. The more this technique is used, the more natural it becomes, and the deeper the insights that emerge. Dialogue with the unconscious. When engaging with the images that arise in active imagination, the experience may feel strange at first. We are not accustomed to directly interacting with our unconscious, and the idea of having a dialogue with internal figures can seem unnatural. But Jung discovered that these images are not random. They represent deep aspects of the psyche, often carrying important messages. The key is to approach this experience with curiosity and respect, without trying to control what happens. The more freely the interaction flows, the more authentic the responses will be. These inner figures can appear in various forms. Some people see clear characters like a wise old man, a frightened child, or even an animal. Others perceive sensations, symbols, or abstract scenes. The important part is not the shape they take, but what they communicate. When an image appears, instead of just observing it, the idea is to start an internal conversation. Ask who or what it represents, what message it wants to convey, and if there is something that needs to be understood. This exchange may seem subjective, but it generates insights that make sense within a person's life. Many times, the solution to an emotional problem comes directly from this internal dialogue. What makes this process powerful is that it goes beyond conscious reflection. Instead of trying to rationalize a doubt or a conflict, active imagination allows the unconscious to express itself directly. And the most fascinating part is that these inner figures do not always say what you expect. Sometimes, unexpected responses emerge, uncomfortable revelations, or even confrontations with repressed aspects of the personality. The important thing is not to judge, but to allow the dialogue to unfold without censorship. Over time, this practice strengthens the connection with the unconscious and significantly refines self-awareness. The need for an ethical approach. Exploring the unconscious is a fascinating process, but it also requires responsibility. Not everything that emerges in active imagination should be followed or taken as absolute truth. The unconscious contains both positive aspects and primitive, instinctive, and sometimes destructive content. Jung always warned about this. Archetypes can carry both wisdom and dangerous impulses. This is why the ego must act as a mediator, analyzing what arises and deciding what can be useful for real life. If this distinction is not made, there is a risk of distorted interpretations, where someone may feel guided by internal symbols without questioning the impact of their actions. Ethical responsibility in this process is not just about interpretation, but also about how the insights are applied. Some discoveries may bring up repressed desires or aggressive impulses, but that does not mean they should be acted upon without reflection. Jung saw individuation as a balance between instincts and conscious values. The unconscious has no morality. It simply presents images and content that reflect deep aspects of the psyche. It is up to each person to discern what can be integrated constructively and what needs to be reworked to avoid harm to themselves or others. Another important point is that active imagination should never replace real-world interactions. Some people become so absorbed in their inner universe that they lose connection with daily life. True psychological development happens when what is discovered in the unconscious is used to improve real life, whether in relationships, in dealing with challenges, or in personal growth. If the practice does not lead to real, beneficial changes, something is being done incorrectly. The unconscious can be a great ally, but it should never become an excuse to avoid responsibility for one's own choices. The importance of rituals. What happens in active imagination should not remain only in the mind. For discoveries to become part of real life, they must be integrated in some way, and this is where rituals come in. They serve as a way to solidify what was experienced, giving a concrete form to something that might otherwise fade from memory. And this does not have to be mystical or complicated. A ritual can be as simple as writing about the experience in a journal, drawing the symbols that appeared, or creating a small symbolic gesture to represent the lesson learned. The essential part is to transform what was seen internally into something tangible. Jung understood this very well. In the Red Book, he did not just describe his experiences with active imagination. He illustrated the symbols that emerged, almost as if bringing them to life. This process was not just documentation but a way of deepening his connection with the unconscious. Those who practice this type of ritual notice that it strengthens the impact of discoveries and prevents them from being forgotten. In daily life, this can be applied in many ways, such as keeping a reflection journal, painting or drawing symbols from active imagination, writing a letter to oneself, or placing an object in a visible place as a reminder of the insight. Additionally, rituals help mark internal changes. When a powerful symbolic experience occurs, turning it into a concrete action reinforces the commitment to transformation. If someone, for example, realizes through active imagination that they need to let go of a destructive behavioral pattern, they can create a symbolic act to represent this decision, like throwing away an object that represents the past or writing a letter about that phase of life and burning it afterward. These small gestures may seem insignificant, but they carry enormous psychological weight, making the transformation feel real and definitive. Active imagination is a powerful technique that can profoundly transform your understanding of and interaction with the unconscious. By applying the steps we have shared, you begin to unlock hidden layers of the psyche and integrate these discoveries into your self-awareness journey. If you want to dive even deeper into yourself and explore your potential for transformation, I invite you to check out my ebook, Alchemy and Archetypes: Exploring Inner Transformation Through Jungian Psychology. In it, you'll find more practical exercises that reveal the secrets of Jungian psychology and show you how to apply them for genuine internal transformation.